Are you ready for a journey into the darkest corners of the human experience? A journey where the line between reality and nightmare blurs? If you're easily spooked, if shadows make you jump, this is your warning. Tonight we delve into the unsettling, the unexplained, the deeply disturbing. We explore 3 true, scary stories, each more chilling than the last. Stories that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the world around you. So turn off the lights, lock your doors, and prepare to be disturbed. These are 3 true, scary stories that will haunt you. Imagine yourself alone on a deserted highway. The black ribbon of asphalt stretches endlessly before you, swallowed by the suffocating darkness. The only sound, the rhythmic hum of your tires on the pavement. This was Tom's reality. He had been driving for hours, the monotony of the road wearing at his sanity. Every mile felt like 10, every hour an eternity. Fatigue gnawed at the edges of his awareness, his eyelids heavy, his vision blurring. Then, in the distance, a flicker of movement. A figure emerged from the darkness, illuminated by the harsh glare of Tom's headlights. A lone girl stood by the roadside, a fragile silhouette against the unforgiving night. Something about her, a subtle vulnerability, tugged at Tom's conscience. He knew the dangers of picking up hitchhikers, but something compelled him to slow down. As Tom's car rolled to a stop, the girl stepped closer. Her features were obscured by a curtain of long, dark hair, but he could make out the outline of her slender frame. She wore a simple white dress, thin and tattered, like something out of a forgotten dream. He noticed her feet were bare, exposed to the cold, unforgiving night. Her skin, pale and almost translucent, seemed to shimmer faintly in the moonlight. An unsettling chill ran down Tom's spine. "Are you lost?" he asked, his voice raspy from hours of silence. The girl nodded slowly, her face still hidden from view. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper, a mere breath on the wind. "Home," she uttered, the word hanging in the air like a whispered premonition. Tom hesitated for a moment, a strange sense of foreboding washing over him. But something in her voice, a note of desperation, broke through his apprehension. He unlocked the passenger door, and the girl slid silently into the seat beside him. As the girl settled into the car, a palpable chill filled the small space. Tom could see her breath in the air even though the heater was blasting. The girl remained silent, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. "Where do you live?" Tom asked, trying to break the oppressive silence. The girl simply raised a trembling hand, pointing down the desolate highway. Minutes stretched into an eternity as they drove. The only sounds were the low hum of the engine and the rhythmic swish of the windshield wipers battling a light drizzle. The silence was heavy, oppressive, punctuated only by the girl's shallow breaths. Then, breaking the silence, the girl whispered, "Slow down." Her voice was strained, urgent. Tom instinctively slammed on the brakes, his heart pounding in his chest. "This is where I died," the girl whispered, her voice barely audible above the roar of blood in Tom's ears. He whipped his head around, his heart threatening to burst from his chest. The passenger seat was empty. Panic surged through him. His foot slammed on the accelerator and the car lurched forward. He wrestled with the steering wheel, narrowly avoiding a collision with a guardrail. The car spun, tires screaming, before finally skidding to a halt in a ditch on the side of the road. Gasping for air, hands trembling, Tom scanned his surroundings. Then he saw it. A small weathered wooden cross stood by the roadside, barely visible in the darkness. He stumbled out of the car, drawn to it as if in a trance. The inscription on the cross, weathered by time but still legible, sent a shiver down Tom's spine. In memory of Emily Carter, it read. Died in a car accident, February 12th, 1993. Tom's blood ran cold. His breath caught in his throat, forming icy shards in his lungs. The girl's words echoed in his mind. This is where I died. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught his eye. The rear-view mirror inside the wrecked car. It flickered, a faint light dancing in its depths. Tom's gaze remained fixed on the rear-view mirror, his breath trapped in his chest. And then he saw her, the girl, Emily. She was sitting in the back seat of his car, her head tilted slightly, her eyes staring directly at him. Her face, once obscured by shadows, was now clearly visible. Her features were ethereal, almost beautiful, but her eyes held a depth of sadness that pierced Tom's soul. And then, as quickly as she appeared, she was gone. The rear-view mirror was empty, reflecting only the empty road behind him. Tom, shaken to his core, stumbled back to his car, desperate to escape the chilling scene. As he fumbled with the keys, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. Emily's words, whispered on the wind, followed him into the night. This is where I died. Imagine moving into a new apartment, excited for a fresh start. But as you unpack your belongings, you notice an unsettling stillness, a heavy silence that seems to press in on you. This was Jake's experience. He had just moved into a cheap one-bedroom apartment in an aging building. The previous tenant had left abruptly, almost desperately, leaving behind an unsettling emptiness. But the rent was too good to pass up, and Jake, eager for a fresh start, brushed off the strange energy that clung to the apartment walls. The first night, as he lay in bed, fatigue threatening to pull him under, he heard it, a faint whispering, barely audible above the hum of the city outside. At first he dismissed it as the old building settling, the pipes groaning in protest. But as the nights passed, the whispering grew more distinct, more insistent. One night, as Jake lay in bed, the whispering morphed into something more sinister. A voice, raspy and chilling, slithered from the air vent near his bed. "Jake!" It hissed. His heart pounded in his chest, every instinct screaming at him to run. He froze, his body rigid with terror. He wasn't imagining it. The voice was real, emanating from the cold metal grate of the air vent. Heart racing, Jake pressed his ear against the vent, desperate to make sense of the impossible. "I see you," the voice whispered, each word laced with icy malice. Jake recoiled as if burned, scrambling away from the vent. He grabbed his phone, his hands shaking so violently he could barely dial. With trembling fingers, Jake hit the record button on his phone and held his breath, listening intently. The whispering continued, a steady stream of unintelligible murmurs, and then something new. Breathing. Heavy, laboured breathing, as if someone was pressed against the other side of the vent, watching him. The next morning, Jake replayed the recording, his stomach churning with dread. The whispering was there, clear as day, and the breathing, heavy and uneven, sent chills down his spine. He couldn't ignore it any longer. He had to know what or who was lurking behind the vent. With a mix of fear and morbid curiosity, Jake grabbed a screwdriver and approached the air vent. With a grunt, Jake pried open the air vent, his heart pounding in his chest. Inside, he discovered a small, cramped space, barely big enough for a small animal, let alone a person. But as he peered closer, his blood ran cold. In the thin layer of dust that coated the inside of the vent, he saw them. Fingerprints, human fingerprints. Someone had been living in the vent. As Jake's eyes adjusted to the dim light, he noticed something else, something that sent a fresh wave of terror through him. A folded notebook lay tucked into the corner of the vent. He reached in, his fingers brushing against something cold and damp. Hesitantly, Jake unfolded the notebook. The pages were filled with cramped handwriting, the ink smeared as if written in haste. It was a journal, and every entry was about him. Friday. He sleeps at 2 a.m, leaves for work at 8, one entry read. Saturday. He doesn't lock the bathroom window, another chillingly stated. Sunday. He still doesn't know I'm here. The last entry was dated yesterday. Jake felt a cold sweat prickle his skin. Someone had been watching him, documenting his every move. As Jake absorbed the horrifying reality of the situation, a sound pierced the silence of the apartment. A floorboard creaked behind him, a slow, deliberate creak, like someone was shifting their weight, preparing to strike. Fear, primal and consuming, seized Jake's body. He didn't dare turn around. He knew with chilling certainty that he was not alone in the apartment. The whispering man, the stalker who had been watching him, was here, and he was about to come face to face with the terror that had been lurking just out of sight. Emma was home alone, just trying to unwind after a long day, scrolling through her phone, catching up on social media, you know, the usual. But then a text message popped up on her screen. And this wasn't just any text message. This one was about to send chills down her spine. It was from her best friend Jess, just 3 short sentences, but enough to make Emma's heart skip a beat. "Why are you staring at me?" it read. Emma frowned, her brow furrowing in confusion. She quickly typed back, "What are you talking about? It just didn't make sense." Jess was miles away. They were just texting back and forth. What was she talking about? But before Emma could even process her own thoughts, a reply came through instantly. "Look at the photo," it said. Her fingers trembled slightly as she clicked to open the attachment, and that's when the blood ran cold. The photo showed a grainy image of her living room taken from outside her window. There she was, Emma, sitting on her couch just like she was at that very moment. But that wasn't the creepy part. The truly terrifying thing was the angle of the photo. Someone had been standing right outside her window, close enough to snap a picture. A cold shiver shot up Emma's spine. Slowly, almost robotically, she turned to look at the window. It was dark outside, the only light coming from the street lamps casting long shadows. Condensation clung to the glass, blurring the view, and then, as if materializing from thin air, a handprint appeared on the window, right in the center of the light from inside. Emma's heart leapt into her throat, pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. Fear, raw and primal, surged through her veins. She scrambled back from the window as if it had suddenly burst into flames. Her mind raced, a jumbled mess of terror and disbelief. Who was out there? How long had they been watching her? Without a second thought, Emma flew to the door, her hand shaking as she fumbled with the lock. Every creak and groan of the old house sounded like footsteps getting closer. She had to get out, to get help. But as she finally managed to yank the door open, she collided with a solid wall of people. Blinking in the sudden brightness, Emma found herself face to face with two police officers. "Miss, we got your call. Are you okay?" one of them asked, his voice laced with concern. Emma stared at them, her mind struggling to catch up. She stammered, her voice trembling. She hadn't called anyone. The officers, sensing her distress, gently guided her back inside. They carefully checked the entire house, every nook and cranny, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Doors were checked and double-checked, windows examined for signs of forced entry. But everything was secure. There was no sign of anyone ever being there, except... Emma sat huddled on the couch, wrapped in a blanket the officers had given her. She couldn't shake the feeling of icy fingers tracing their way down her spine. The photo, the handprint, the feeling of being watched. It was all too real, too terrifying to dismiss. The officers, though skeptical, were kind. They assured her they were taking the situation seriously. They reviewed the footage from her home security camera, hoping to catch a glimpse of whoever had been outside her window. And that's when things took an even more sinister turn. The footage showed something truly chilling. There, clear as day, was a man approaching her house. He was tall and wearing dark clothing, his face obscured by a baseball cap pulled low over his brow. He walked with an eerie confidence, like he knew exactly where he was going. The timestamp on the video confirmed it was just minutes before Jess had sent the text. The officers watched the footage intently, their faces grim. The man in the video clearly entered Emma's house. He was seen walking up to the front door, but then the footage skipped, a glitch in the system. When the feed returned, he was gone. The officers rewound the footage, playing the segment again and again, scrutinizing every frame. But no matter how many times they watched it, the result was the same. The man entered the house, and then he simply vanished. There was no sign of him exiting through any door or window. It was as if he had disappeared into thin air. Emma watched the footage, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. The hair on the back of her neck stood on end. Who was this man, and how had he just vanished? The officers were baffled. They had never seen anything like it. They searched the house again, this time even more thoroughly. They checked closets, under beds, even the attic and crawl spaces. But there was still no sign of forced entry, no sign of a struggle, and no sign of the man. It was as if he had simply ceased to exist the moment he stepped inside her house.
Negative K, nothing further, just see the cabbie on the corner.
The officers, though unable to offer any explanation, promised to increase patrols in the area. They took Emma's statement, assuring her they would do everything they could to find out who the man was and what he had been doing in her house. But as the days turned into weeks, the mystery remained unsolved. Emma couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The incident had left an indelible mark on her psyche. She started double-checking locks, jumping at shadows, and scrutinizing every unfamiliar face she passed on the street. She had always considered herself a strong, independent woman, but now a seed of fear had been planted, and it was slowly taking root. Sleep became difficult, haunted by nightmares of the man from the security footage. She could still see his eyes, cold and calculating, watching her every move. The photo Jess had sent continued to haunt her, a constant reminder that someone had been watching her, invading her privacy in the most unsettling way. Emma never found out who the man in the window was. The police investigation eventually went cold, the mystery remaining unsolved. But the experience left an undeniable scar. It was a stark reminder that even in the supposed safety of her own home, danger could lurk just outside, hidden in plain sight. To this day, Emma remains vigilant, never quite able to shake the feeling that she's being watched. She installed a new security system, upgraded her locks, and even started taking self-defense classes. But the fear lingers, a constant companion in the shadows, and sometimes late at night, when the wind whispers through the trees and the house creaks and groans around her, Emma can't help but glance at her window, her heart quickening with a familiar dread. Because deep down she knows that some mysteries are never meant to be solved. And some fears never truly disappear, they just fade into the background, waiting for the right moment to resurface. So there you have it. 3 true scary stories that prove sometimes reality can be far more terrifying than fiction. The Vanishing Hitchhiker, a chilling reminder that not all those who seem lost are searching for directions. The Whispering Man, a testament to the unseen horrors that may lurk closer than we think. And The Man in the Window, a stark illustration of the vulnerability we all feel within our own homes. Which story disturbed you the most? Let us know in the comments. And remember, the scariest things in life are the ones we never see coming.